Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Graham, and on today's program, we're going to go deep diving in UFC 224 coming up this weekend on pay-per-view, coming to you live from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, on pay-per-view with the main card on FX in the United States for the prelims, and then the early prelims and UFC Fight Pass starting at 6:15 Eastern, and then 8 Eastern for the FX prelims, and then of course 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 in the West for the UFC 224 main card. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. You can also like the page right here, MMA World, streaming to you live every week on Thursday afternoons. Again, that's facebook.com/MMA World with 2 extra Ds. Also the same handle on Twitter as well as Instagram. And you can also like our sister page, our contributing news page, MMA UK. That's facebook.com/Mixed Martial Arts UK. We are at We Are MMA UK on Twitter as well. So thank you to everybody for joining me here once again on the program. And this week, as I said, I will be talking about UFC 224, but as always, please feel free to comment down below with your questions, comments, or concern about anything related to mixed martial arts and combat sports as well. So, super excited for this weekend of fights. I know a lot of people are saying, well, you know, it's not that big a card, it's not that big of an event, this, that, and the other, but honestly, looking over this card from top to bottom, it's a very solid card. It may not be a card that has a whole bunch of star power. It may not be a card that has a whole bunch of, you know, big names or big title fights or, you know, a lot of fights with championship aspirations or anything like that. But I think it's a very solid card. It definitely, if I'm being honest, it probably wouldn't be one I would just outright buy for $60, but it definitely would be one that I would go up to the bar and check out on Saturday night. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So also this weekend as well, it's going to be the day after, if I have my, let me double check on the dates there. That's going to be Glory 53. That's going to be coming up. Actually, it's the same day, Saturday, May 12th, but it's going to be earlier in the afternoon for those of us here in the U.S., 3:30 Eastern with the main card, headlined by current lightweight champion Sitsong Pyong, a.k.a. Sitachai, who's been nothing but fantastic. He's taking on the young gentleman by the name of Bastati, who is absolutely incredible, but man, I don't know. Then you got Jamal Ben Sadiq against Jason Wilness in the heavyweight division. That should be fun. I like Hammerlane against Dute in the light heavyweight division. Then, of course, we have a women's title fight between Angela Mexen and Emile Debbie. That should be absolutely fantastic. I'm loving that. Then we got the other Sitsong Pyong, Tongchai, taking on Cedric Doumbé as the headline fight on the Super Fight Series on UFC Fight Pass. We also have one of the Pinto brothers, former featherweight champion Sergey Adamchuk. Those two are actually going to be part of a 4-man featherweight tournament, so that should be great. I'm excited for that. Belgari is also fighting on the undercard as well, so that should be fun. I think a pretty good card. So if you got ESPN or well, if you got ESPN, everybody really has ESPN, but you can log on free at watchespn.com and check out the main card. And obviously, if you have UFC Fight Pass, you'll get kind of a double feature on Saturday. So I'm very excited for Glory 53. That should be a lot of fun coming up as well this weekend. So pretty packed weekend for combat sports. And then if you missed it last weekend, was Invicta FC 29. So if you hadn't checked that out on UFC Fight Pass, I would recommend that. Some pretty good fights, some pretty credible names, including former UFC fighter Pearl Gonzalez, as well as Sarah Kaufman, doing battle on that card from Kansas City, Missouri. So as we move into UFC 224, though, I'm not going to go super in-depth on the prelim fights. I'm going to really focus on the main card, as any viewer of this program has done. But Looking over at the early prelims, though, real quickly, I think some pretty good fights. Probably, in my opinion, the best would probably be Jack Hermanson against Talis Leites. I would say that's probably the biggest fight, in my opinion. Of course, Talis Leites is a very, very accomplished Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, guy who has fought for a UFC championship. And really, up until the last 18 months, Talis Leites was on a very nice run between several organizations, including the UFC, and has returned to the organization in his second stint, but has kind of fell on hard times as of late. Is if you look at his last couple fights, and to me, really, I think this really goes back to, before he came back in the UFC in 2013 after about a 4-year layoff from the but a 4-year absence from the organization. He came back and won 5 fights. He didn't beat anyone super amazing, but I mean, at the time, Francis Carmont was, a young up-and-coming guy. He knocked him out in the second round. Tim Bosch was still a very, dangerous guy to deal with. He was able to submit him in the first round. So then you look on that, he loses 2 back-to-back fights, 2 of them to very good fighters in Michael Bisping and Gegard Mousasi. In my opinion, I actually thought he had won the Michael Bisping fight. I think a lot of things change in Talis's career had he got the nod that day in Scotland. That was now about 3 years ago. Then he's had a couple wins in there against guys, again, that are not elite, and definitely not elite grapplers, and Chris Camuzzi and Sam Alvey, submitting Camuzzi and getting a decision over Alvey. But really, since that loss to Bisping, he's only 2-4 in his last 6 fights. Trading wins and losses his last 4, with 1 loss coming to Christophe Jacko, which was a pretty big upset, I'm not going to lie. And then his last fight, I thought he had looked absolutely horrible in his last fight there against Brad Tavares in October of last year at UFC 216, where Brad Tavares completely shut him down. So we'll see what Talis Leites shows up. I'm not sure how much he has left in the tank, but definitely a guy I would say that, lately has been trending down. And Hermanson's a guy that I think is a talented individual. He's pretty tall for this weight class. Very long, lanky guy. 16-4, really good record, young guy. He's been kind of hit or miss so far in the UFC. 3-2 so far in his career. He's won 2 out of his 3-2 in his career, so not crazy, but he has won 2 out of his last 3 fights. However, he ran into Thiago Santos in his last fight, and no shame losing to a guy like Thiago, getting knocked in the first round. But before that, he had back-to-back finishes over Alex Nicholson, who's a tough guy, as well as Brad Scott, another tough guy. So he got both those guys away in the first round. Now, no offense to Talis Leites, but Thiago Santos, he is not. Very much, I would say the stand-up, just based on what's kind of been happening previously, I would favor Jack Hermanson, but obviously the grappling exchange is definitely Talis Leites. So that's probably the most intrigued bout I'm looking forward to there on the undercard as far as the early prelims go. Looking at the FS1 portion of the prelims, there's some decent fights here. We got Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. I think they've been calling him EZS or something like that. He's taking on Sean Strickland. Strickland's a guy that's been around the UFC for a bit, has a very impressive record. At one point, I think got to 17-0 or 16-0. Is now 18-2-1. Solid fighter. I really like him at welterweight. Dos Santos, if I'm not mistaken, is coming off a win over... Well, actually, believe it or not, he has actually won 4 in a row in the UFC. Boy, I didn't know that. Did you know that? Comment below if you knew that. I didn't know that. The last fight I remember him being in was the fight against Lyman Good. And this is even crazy when you think about this too. 4-fight winning streak after losing his UFC debut. He's only finished 1 of them. The other 3 he's won by decision. And 3 of those have been fight of the nights. So this is a guy who's super entertaining. He's been able to win. I wouldn't say he's been fighting bums. I mean, he beat Omari Akhmedov in his first win of this streak, knocking him out in the 3rd round. Then he beat Keita Nakamura, who I think is pretty solid. Then, like I said, Lyman Good. That was definitely a heck of a fight. A fight I probably would have scored him losing, but heck of a fight. And then Max Griffin, of course, just beat Mike Perry. So beating Max Griffin, that's a pretty good win, right? So, I mean, this guy's beaten some very solid competition in his last four fights. And then his very first fight was against Nicholas Dalby, who I think solid too. So I wouldn't say anyone in there is a bum. I wouldn't say he hasn't been fighting bums. And he's won 4 fights in a row with 3 fights tonight. So this guy is just kind of sneaking up on, just sneaking up on me right here in the welterweight division. So I think he's worth definitely checking out there on those FSM prelims. And as I mentioned, he's taking on Sean Strickland. Started his UFC career at 185 pounds. Now finds himself with a really good record. Again, still a great record. As of late, he started his UFC career 2 wins in a row. Then he dropped down to 170 after 2-0 at 185. Drops down. Close fight, but loses to Ponzinibbio. Then wins 3 in a row over the likes of Igor Araujo, Alex Garcia, and Tom Breeze. Definitely not bums. Then he loses to Kamaru Usman, but let's be honest, everyone's been losing to Kamaru Usman, so that's not a bad loss there. And then he returned in November of last year and beat the always very tough, even at this stage in his career, Court McGee. So he's won 4 out of his last 5 fights. Definitely a guy at 170 that's very long, very lanky. And with that, he's a very strong guy. He's a tricky matchup. He's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage and a 2-inch height advantage over the Brazilian. We'll see how it goes. I think the one thing I like about Dos Santos is the fact his willingness to fight, the willingness to get into the brawl. And so far, I haven't really seen that from Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland, to me, is very much more a point fighter. He's more methodical. He's more looking for the right opportunity. I consider him a little more of a grinder. And we'll see if he can employ that type of strategy and slow Dos Santos down, or try to do something to wear him out, make him throw a lot of high energy, big power shots that wear him down but don't land. Then he can win. But if he's not ready to brawl or even tries to brawl, I'm not sure if that's the best thing to do, because this guy Anzaliki Dos Santos has definitely shown that he loves to scrap, and he's going to be doing so this time in his home country, Brazil, where he right now he's the fighter on the big streak right now. He's on a 4-fight win streak, and if he can get by a guy like Sean Strickland, they'll push his winning streak to 5 in a row. It makes him pretty legit. You got to start taking him as a serious threat in this division, a guy that you got to start talking about, because 5 in a row in this division, that's a big deal. I don't care who you're beating. So I like that one. Heavyweight. The boa constrictor, a.k.a. Alexei Olenek. This guy's been around forever against the self-proclaimed baby, and he even does it up by trying to make his shorts look like a diaper. I don't know what this guy's got going on in his head, but we're talking about Junior Albini. I don't know, man. This is a very intriguing fight. I would say Albini probably has the stand-up advantage, but I don't know. Was it his last fight? I'm going to double check this here. I didn't care for his last fight, if I remember right. I want to say that was against Orlovsky. Yeah, he came on, he had that really big upset knockout of Tim Johnson and his UFC debut in July of last year. And then in November, he fought Orlovsky. I mean, it was a bad fight by both of them, so don't make it seem like I'm just pointing out that Junior Albini was bad. That was just a bad fight all around. But after the performance that he had against Tim Johnson, we were looking for, how would he do again? Even though Orlovsky's a veteran, obviously on the downside of his career. Yeah, it was not a good fight. So I'm not really sure what Junior Albini's going to show up here, because last time he took on a veteran heavyweight, he looked horrible. He fought horrible. So he's fighting in his home country, Brazil. Maybe that'll energize him or something. But Olenek's a guy you can't really sleep on, because he puts you to sleep. This is a guy who's landed several Ezekiel chokes in MMA, which is very hard to do, even in no-gi straight jiu-jitsu competitions. So this guy is very versed in the submission game. I think overall he has 50 wins in his career, 52 according to UFC.com, with 11 losses and 1 draw, and I think 40 of them, over 40 of them, are by submission. Ridiculous. So if this thing goes to the ground, the Russian has a significant advantage in this fight. And very much that's what he needs to do, because Olenek, I don't think, can really stand on the feet anymore. I think his last couple fights has proven that, he's not really competent there. I mean, look at his fight again, really his last 2 fights. Obviously, Curtis Blades, stoppage aside, illegal kick aside, was putting the brakes on him. Olenek could do nothing to stand up with Curtis. And then before that, even though he did get the win, Travis Brown was putting the brakes to him too. And then Travis Brown just, I don't know, had a brain fart or something. But this is a fight where I'm not really sure, because Olenek, again, he's on the downside of his career. He really only kind of has one trick, and that's being on the ground. Top or bottom control, he can submit you. But if he's not there, he's got nothing for you on the feet. So if Albini can show what he did against Tim Johnson, he should have a quick night, be able to possibly get a knockout of the night bonus. But if he kind of does this weird lackadaisical thing like he did against Arlovski, he might be able to get taken down and submitted very easily by the Russian. All right, and then Carl Robertson, boy, this guy's super exciting. People are, a lot of hype right now is on another former Glory kickboxer in Israel Adonijah, aka the Style Bender. But Carl Roberson's a guy that was also a Glory kickboxer for a while as well, and he's also undefeated in mixed martial arts. He's at 6-0, and he's a guy in the middleweight division you got to look out for. So obviously, high class stand-up skills. He's so far fought 1.5 times for the UFC. The reason I say that because his debut was for the Tuesday Night Contender Series, in which he scorched the dude in 8 seconds. And that was from a guy trying to take him down with elbows. He scorched him. So obviously, Carl Robeson has been working on his takedown defense, if you think you just take him down. And then he took on a very tough Darren Stewart in his next fight, and he submitted him. So this guy's not just a world-class kickboxer, okay? He has actual martial arts skills. He has submission skills. He has takedown defense. He has conditioning. He can do all that and still have that kickboxing in his back pocket. So very interested to see how he does against a guy in Cesar Fajeda, who is a monster in this weight class, just an absolute huge middleweight, even though I still don't know how he made it down to 170 for a couple fights. But very big dude, very legit grappling skills. Does have some knockout power. Obviously fighting in his home country, Brazil, where he always seems to do well. But Fajeda's got caught a few times. I mean, Sam Alvey has knocked him out. Jorge Masvidal has knocked him out. So this is a guy that definitely has gotten touched before, in his career. And he's also he got knocked out by CB Dalloway somehow, believe it or not. And CB Dalloway, pillow fist. So this is definitely a guy who, has been knocked out before. However, he's on a pretty decent streak. He's won 4 out of his last 5 fights, the lone loss coming to Elias Theodorou, who, is a very tough grappler, but he's been able to beat guys like Aloe Bambuzabe, Anthony Smith, which is a big win, and also he beat Jack Hermanson, who's also fighting in this card, and most recently he defeated Nate Marquardt back in November of last year. So Cesar Fajeda is definitely the more experienced guy. He definitely has the more grappling experience of the two, and obviously fighting in his home country of Brazil. So he does have some things going for him in this fight, but I think this is going to be a fantastic fight. I'm really excited to see Carl Robeson. Actually, if Robeson wins, I actually want to see Robeson against Adonijah. I think that would be the fight to make. And thanks for checking in, Miles. Appreciate it. Miles helping run the comments section, as always here in Beyond the Cage, so appreciate that. But I'm really looking forward to that Roberson-Fajeda fight. And again, that's on FX for the viewers here in the United States. Not FS1, not FS2, or anything like that, or Fox. It's actually FX. So make sure to check that you got FX, or you make sure you get on the right channel or whatnot. That's starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. All right. So I wouldn't go in depth on the undercard, but I kind of did. All right, let's get to the main card here, the meat and bones here of UFC 224, again on pay-per-view starting at 10 p.m. Eastern from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Starting with the first fight of the evening in the middleweight division, as former light heavyweight champion Lyoto Machida takes on former light heavyweight champion Vitor Belfort. Here again in a middleweight match. It's Brazil versus Brazil. It's two of the best fighters ever to come out of the country. Obviously, both former UFC champions. Both have had incredible careers. Both, however, towards the end of their careers. Looking at these two fighters, of course, Vitor Belfort was supposed to fight earlier this year against Uriah Hall. That fight didn't materialize. Of course, most people know what happened with Uriah Hall. He had the mini kind of seizure, heart attack sort of deal there that prevented that fight from going down earlier this year in St. Louis, I think just a day or two before it was supposed to take place. However, Vitor Belfort didn't win his last fight nearly a year ago. That was against Nate Marquardt. He did win that fight, but besides that, he's only won one fight in his last four, losing to Jacare Gegard Mousasi, and then technically it's a no contest, but against Calvin Gastelum. But realistically, he's lost 3 out of his last 4, and he got finished in all those. Then he did have the win there in 2005 where he knocked out Dan Henderson in their trilogy. But definitely a guy that's on the downside of his career, and obviously he's taken on a guy who's also kind of on the downside of his career. However, much like Vitor, Machida did win his last fight after losing his previous 3 too. So they both have won their last fight. And the 3 losses, much like Vitor, Machida got finished in all those fights, getting submitted by Luke Rockhold and knocked out by Derek Brunson, as well as Yoel Romero. His last fight, also much like Vitor Belfort, was a split decision. The only difference, obviously, Machida's fight being a 5-round fight, and was the main event of the evening. But that's a fight I did think Lyoto Machida lost, in my opinion. But he got the win, whatever. And looking at this fight, even though Vitor is a guy who at times has shown great patience, great calm, his hallmark of his career is a guy that rushes forward, blitzes you, and knocks you out. That's kind of been the hallmark of his career. Lyoto Machida is the complete opposite of that. He's very much a guy that wants you to rush forward. He wants to counter you. He wants to throw leg kicks. He's very comfortable striking from the outside and very comfortable striking off his back foot, waiting for that one moment to just pounce, and you're out. So very much a contrasting of styles. So will we see kind of the Vitor Belfort we saw against Nate Marquardt, where we're seeing a more reserved, a more calm, a focused and measured Vitor Belfort? Or will we see classic Vitor Belfort just saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to go after this guy. He has a weak chin. He can't hit me with anything. I'm just going to go after him. I don't know. We'll see. Because Lyoto Machida does what Lyoto Machida does. He hasn't changed his style really much since entering the UFC, and I don't see it changing now. He's going to wait for the perfect opportunity. So to me, it's really going to be, can Vitor Belfort get on the inside? Is he still fast enough to counter and land on Lyoto Machida before those counters land? And is he able to rush forward enough and not get caught? So it's intriguing. If it goes to the ground, definitely I would say Machida has the advantage. I think at this, even though he is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt as well, that being Vitor Belfort, just the recent times he's been on the ground, I don't see that happening. I think that's a little bit of an X factor. I possibly could see Leo trying to take this fight to the ground and trying to eliminate the dynamic striking ability of Vitor Belfort. So I think that's a little bit of an X factor we could see. But really what I'm hoping for is that both guys, can we see one last kind of good fight from him? Because like I said, Vitor's last fight and really his last 4 fights haven't been that great. And really Lyoto Machida's last couple fights, not only has he lost, he hasn't really looked that great. And I didn't think he looked great against Eric Anders. So I don't know if it's the last fight officially for either, but I think going out against each other, or one of them going out against each other, I think is a great way to go out. So I think both know that they don't got that many more fights left in them. So I'm really just hoping for a great performance by either to kick off this card here for 224. John Lineker against Brian Keller here in the next matchup in the bantamweight division. Brian Keller is the one that wanted this matchup. He called for it following his second consecutive victory, and he's now won 3 out of his last 4 so far in the UFC. As he pretty much, in all honesty, pretty much beat the brakes off of Hedenbrow in his last fight. I don't think it was so much that he won. I don't think that's what really like caught people off guard, because Renan Barão definitely has been in a slide since losing his championship in the bantamweight division. But I thought he dominated from start to finish. And so I think that's what got people's eye, the fact that he was really able to control the fight from start to finish and never really look like he was ever in trouble against Renan. So I think that's the big thing. So coming to this fight against John Lineker, you know, you got a guy who's definitely younger, faster, definitely a guy that hits hard, and a guy that, you know, is one of the best in this division. Definitely a guy you can't take lightly. So like most people taking on John Lineker, Keller's going to have a height advantage, and actually no reach advantage. So just a slight height advantage, but they got basically the same reach, 66 for Keller, 67 inches for Lineker. However, Lineker, as we know, when he's taking on guys near the elite level, he's, you know, faltered a bit. You know, including losses to Ali Bogatinov in the flyweight division. Of course, he had that loss to TJ Dillashaw, but he's also had some good wins as well. You know, he's beaten the likes of Rob Font, Francisco Rivera, Ian McCall, John Dodson, you know, and most recently, I thought, very impressively, beat Marlon Vera. And Marlon Vera is actually the guy who handed Keller his one loss in the UFC. And in that last fight, John Lineker, I thought, performed amazing. It was also the fact I thought Marlon Vera performed poorly, but you know, John Lineker did really good in his last fight. So if it stays standing, I think it's a pretty even matchup. I think they both hit hard. I think they both can go 15 minutes throwing you know, a high output of strikes. The difference will be the wrestling. Of course, we saw TJ Dillashaw very much control John Lineker on the ground. We saw Ali Bogatinov do it, and again, this was in the flyweight division, but still, those are two guys that are really good grapplers, and they were able to impose their will with the grappling game. I believe Keller, if I'm not mistaken, 19-8 so far in his career. I thought he had collegiate wrestling background. I'm going to double check on that, but I think he does have some wrestling. I remember them saying that in the fight with Renan Barão. So I'm going to double check on that here. Let's see. He's also competed for Bellator and CES. No, actually, from what I could tell, doesn't have any collegiate wrestling experience. It says as a youth he played hockey, soccer, and bowling. So there you go. So apparently he doesn't. So that's something. But we'll see, because people have been able to dominate Lineker with the wrestling. We'll see if that's something Kelleher tries to do here. If not, you know, like I said, I think it's a pretty 50-50 match on the feet. I think it's going to be super exciting. I think it's going to be a fast fight. It's going to be a quick fight. It's going to be a fun fight. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a finish or possibly fight of the night. I think this is probably going to be my call here for fight night. I think this one could possibly steal the show the whole night. Next matchup here on the main card, a girl I know very well, a girl I've interviewed several times, and she trains just a few miles from me here in Michigan. That's Michigan's own Amanda Bobby Cooper, a.k.a. ABC. She's taking on Mackenzie Dern. Dern so far undefeated in her mixed martial arts career, 6-0. The highly touted female Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, taking on Cooper, 4-3 so far in her career. Cooper coming off a big win right here at home at UFC 218 as she was able to take out and eventually get her cut from the organization. I'm talking about Angela Magana to get her second win in the UFC. She also has a win over Anna Elmos as well. That was back in November of 2016. So far 2-2 in the UFC for Cooper. Dern made her UFC debut not that long ago, a little over 2 months ago, as she was able to defeat Ashley Yoder by split decision. She had also previously fought for Legacy as well as Invicta. And the interesting thing about Dern, a lot of people have always talked about this, has been her weight. She's had some trouble in the past making 115 pounds. She's even fought some fights at 125. This, again, will be at 115, so that's always something to watch, whether or not the weight will be an issue. It didn't seem like she had too much of an issue making it in her debut, so I don't see that being an issue, but it's something you at least got to keep your eye on. Now, her stand-up looked decent against Yoder, but how she won that fight was because of her Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills. If there's one thing that Amanda Cooper has had trouble with in the UFC, has been high-level grapplers. She, of course, lost her UFC debut in the Ultimate Fighter finale into a very incredible female wrestler in Tatiana Suarez, getting submitted in the first round. She also had trouble with another very good grappler and submission artist in Cynthia Calvalho just about a year ago, getting submitted by Cynthia in the first round. Now, Tatiana's a good wrestler, but I wouldn't say quite the submission skills of Dern. I would say Calvalho is probably a better all-around fighter than Mackenzie Dern, but in far as straight, submission or straight jiu-jitsu skills, I would say Dern's a little better. And obviously, as I just mentioned, Cooper's got submitted by both those two opponents previously. So, if it goes to the ground, Mackenzie Dern, in most fights she's going to have an advantage. But I think in this fight, I think it is a big difference. I think it is a big difference in grappling. And Amanda Cooper has to be ready for that. And she has to be ready not so much to counter or actually try to implement her own game. It's simply, what can she do to get out of those positions, get out of them quickly, and if she can't, can she do damage to really frustrate and make Mackenzie Dern work harder to get certain positions, to frustrate her. And obviously it all starts with stopping the takedown. That's part of it, but you got to believe that some way, shape, or form, Mackenzie Dern is the type of fighter who I think would even pull guard, because I believe she has so much of an advantage over Amanda Cooper. So that's something I think can very realistically happen. So it's not just simply just stopping the takedown. It's really stopping her from initiating a clinch. And so if Amanda Cooper can do that, I think she does have better stand-up skills than Mackenzie Dern at this stage in the career. They only have one fight difference in mixed martial arts. Cooper has one more fight than Mackenzie. That's it. So it's not like this is an advanced, big gap in experience for Cooper, even though she's had more UFC experience. Overall fight experience, not really much more. And really, even though, and Cooper's fought pretty consistently since debuting in July of 2016. So we'll see. I'm intrigued by this fight, but I think it's going to be a tough fight. I think it's a tough fight for Amanda Cooper. It kind of seems to be her kryptonite, is these high-level grapplers. However, for Dern, I think it is a little bit of a step up from Ashley Yoder. I think it is a little more well-rounded of opponent. But for the UFC, I'm glad that they're not throwing her to the wolves, because I think she is a potential star. I think she's a very likable woman. In terms of her personality, I think she has a great skill set, and I think they want to bring her around the right way. And I think taking on somebody like Cooper, I think that's a nice next step. It's someone who she definitely can beat, but it's definitely someone that I wouldn't say is a complete pushover. All right, let's get to the co-main event of the evening in the middleweight division. Jacare, one of my all-time favorites, taking on Kelvin Gastelum here in the middleweight division. And really, despite Jacare losing to Robert Whittaker back in April of last year, very much still involved in this title picture. His first round knockout finish over Derek Brunson, the second time beating Derek Brunson, the second time he knocked out Derek Brunson, and also the second time he's ever gotten a knockout in his whole entire career also happens against Derek Brunson. With that win, he's very much in the picture. Even when you throw in that loss to Whittaker, Souza's won 3 out of his last 4 fights, including all 3 of those wins were finishes, knocking out Brunson. Also, correct me if I actually jumped the gun there. He does have a third knockout. He actually knocked out Vitor Belfort at UFC 198, so he actually has 3 knockouts. But 2 of them are still against Derek Brunson, though. That's still pretty crazy. And he also has a submission over Tim Bosch wrapped in there as well. So if he gets by Kelvin Gastelum, Jacare is right back in the mix. He's not out of the title picture. So a lot is still on the line for Jacare, and of course for Gastelum. We all know about Kelvin Gastelum's problem with weight. Of course, we all know about his problems that he had with some performance-enhancing substances or marijuana or whatever the case it was. It was something he wasn't supposed to take that overturned his win over Vitor Belfort. Even though he lost, he had overall a pretty good performance, against Chris Weidman, almost knocking out the former champion. And then his last fight, again, I don't think it's a fight Michael Bisping should have took, but he did scorch Michael Bisping in the first round in China last November. So, standing up, this fight's definitely Calvin Gastelum. However, Calvin Gastelum, we already know, is not a huge middleweight. He's going to be faster. I think he hits harder and definitely is the better stand-up fighter. But giving up a lot of size. He's given up 4 inches of height, ideally only 1 inch in reach. But I would say conservatively, he's probably come fight night at least 20 pounds. When Jacare hydrates back up, maybe we're looking 25. He's definitely going to give up a lot of weight to the Brazilian. That is for sure. Also, Jacare, we talked about Mackenzie Dern's jiu-jitsu skills, and they are very good. But Jacare is arguably the best ever, jiu-jitsu-wise, coming over to the UFC. And so if it goes anywhere on the ground, Jacare has an advantage. And obviously, kind of going back to his fight there against Chris Weidman, that's kind of how I could see this fight going. Jacare being able to get takedowns, using his size, using his strength, is just his supreme grappling prowess to eventually overwhelm and Calvin Gastelum to succumb to a submission. However, there was another guy, smaller middleweight, very good at stand-up, hits hard, that was able to stop the takedown and knock him out, and that's current middleweight champion Robert Whittaker. If Calvin Gastelum can do what Robert Whittaker did, which very similar skill set between the two, a little shorter and a little wider frame is Gastelum, but very, very similar in how they approach this middleweight division, being smaller guys, being former welterweights. If he could do that, he could very much beat Jacare Souza. But we'll see. So far, the only one to really do that to Souza is Robert Whittaker. So it's not something, it's easy for me here to say, just follow what Robert Whittaker did. But there's only one Robert Whittaker. They're similar, but there's still only one Robert Whittaker. So if he can follow that blueprint, he can have success. But if he gets routinely taken down, I don't care how much energy he has, he's going to lose this fight. It's a 15-minute fight. Unlike the Chris Weidman one, he could have come back, he could have snuck in, another left hand that knocked him out or something like that. But unlike that, he doesn't have as much time to work with. So if he's constantly getting dragged down, and that stuff wears on you. And really, Jacare is a guy that obviously, Gastelum got submitted by Weidman. But I would say Weidman, while pretty good grappling skills, obviously he works with Matt Serra, a black belt under Renzo Gracie, so the guy definitely has jiu-jitsu skills and knows his way around submissions. I'm not saying he has zero submission prowess, but compared to Jacare, nowhere near that. So that's what I gotta look for, is how long can Gastelum keep this stand. The longer it stays stand, the longer the American has a chance to win this fight. But the more it's in the clinch, the more it's up against the fence, the more it's in close, Jacare has a supreme advantage. Main event of the evening, Amanda Nunes against Raquel Pennington for the Women's Bantamweight Championship of the World. Raquel Pennington, obviously, not saying she doesn't deserve a shot, but I don't like the fact that she hasn't fought since UFC 205, which was November of 2016. So we're going over on an 18-month layoff. Now, granted, she's on a 4-fight winning streak. However, you could make a case that only one of those wins was really good. If I'm being honest, Jessica Andrade is now at 115 pounds. Betchka Hayes, even though she's gotten a title shot, we know is not something incredible. She beat Elizabeth Phillips, who I don't even think is in the UFC anymore. And obviously, the win over Miesha Tate was the first fight after Tate lost to Nunes, lost the title to Nunes. So even though Tate retired after that fight, that's still a high-quality win. Now, I will say I thought she beat Holly Holm back in February of 2015. So even though that fight was a loss, she beat Ashley Evans Smith, who's, again, at 125 pounds. She beat Roxanne Modafferi, who, again, is at 125 pounds. And then she had a loss to Andrade going back to March 2014, again, now at 115 pounds. So, I mean, yeah, she's done well as of late. Yes, she's been improving every fight. Yes, every fight, maybe other than the Betch Kehea one, was pretty dominant. She definitely dominated Phillips. She definitely dominated Tate. She definitely has a lot of skills. She had a lot of tough times, early in her career. That's why her record doesn't look great, 9-6, but on the 4-fight winning streak. And really, since joining the UFC, is 6-2. So she's done very well since joining in the UFC, which was November of 2013. So she's definitely gotten better as the years gone on. She's still only 29 years old. She's definitely very much in the prime of her career, prime of her life too. But again, she's coming off an 18-month layoff. You can make a case she hasn't really beat anybody great. And she's taking on someone who, really other than the 2 fights with Valentina Shevchenko, has pretty much been able to dominate just about everybody she's taken on. She's scorched Sarah McMahon. She scorched Miesha Tate. Who else did she scorch? She scorched Ronda Rousey. She scorched Shayna Baszler. She scorched Sheila Gaff. She scorched Doreen Duranamy. She scorched Julia Budd. She had a loss in Strikeforce to Alexis Davis, but, again, that was 7 years ago, still very early in his career. We all know she did lose to Kat Zingano, but had a lot of success early. Again, that was only her 3rd fight at the time in the UFC. Yeah, she probably should have lost her last fight against Shevchenko. That's fair. I'm not disputing that. You can also make a case she could have lost to Shevchenko in the very first matchup that they met in March of 2016. I would say, though, I did think Nunes won the first matchup, Shevchenko won the second. However, that's the way the judges decided it. And looking at Pennington is very much a grinder. Okay, she's not someone I would consider a fantastic finisher. She's not someone that really has one-shot knockout power. She's not someone that I would say is amazing at submissions. She's not amazing at wrestling. I wouldn't say she's overly strong or overly big for the weight class. I think she's a hard worker. I think she's a grinder. I think she has a tremendous will, heart, and determination. I think she has a strong chin. She's never been finished in the UFC by knockout. Let me double check on that. Yeah, she's never been finished in the UFC. Both her losses were split decisions, so she's a very tough girl to put away. But I think Amanda Nunes, she just hits harder. I think she's bigger. She's stronger. I think she's faster. I think she's better skilled. She's probably not better conditioned, though. I think that's fair. I think that's the biggest knock on Amanda Nunes is her conditioning. And so the later this fight goes, even though Pennington's never fought a 25-minute fight, I think she's going to be ready to go, even despite the long layoff. I think that's the one thing Raquel will have is the conditioning. For she's lived and trained in Denver, Colorado for a very long time, so she shouldn't have any problem with conditioning. That's never really been something that she's struggled with. So I think potentially going an extra 10 minutes, not a big deal for her. However, I just think skill-wise, she's a good fighter, but she doesn't have the skills that Amanda Nunes has. She doesn't put people away like Amanda Nunes does. She really doesn't strike fear into you. You know you're going to have a fight. You know you're going to work hard, but again, it's not someone that's going to take your head off or take your leg off or anything like that. So I think that's why, with this layoff, I would have liked to seen Pennington take another fight before getting this title shot, and that's one of the reasons why I would have liked to seen Nunes against Cyborg first over this matchup. But you get a chance. If anyone thought Nunes isn't that great, that she shouldn't have beat Shevchenko, it gives the UFC another chance to kind of rebuild up Amanda Nunes, that if she goes in there and scorches Raquel Pennington, then the fight with Cyborg's on. They got a lot of reason to give her that shot because this would be her third successful title defense. And with Holly Holm, probably, who knows? Obviously, she has the fight with Megan Anderson. That's really the only top girl that Nunes hasn't fought, somewhere along the line. And if she gets by Pennington, I'm not really sure what else is out there. I'm not sure how interested the UFC is booking a trilogy fight against Shevchenko, regardless of whether or not Shevchenko should have won one or both of those fights. I don't know how interested they are in doing that. And obviously, that could get hyped up if Shevchenko does become the 125 champion, so possibly if that happens. But you know what I mean? I think it would be the time to jump up and get that Cyborg fight. So I think for Nunes, she has a lot on the line. I think it's not enough for her just to win. I think she does need to win impressively, because I think that's the UFC wants to see, whether or not she's worthy of getting the Cyborg fight and all the big attention and money that would do. So I think this is a very big fight for Amanda Nunes. All right, with that said, let's get to picks here. UFC 224, first fight of the evening, Vitor Belfort against Leo Machida. I'm going to go with Vitor Belfort in this one. I think he has a little better of a chin at this stage in his career. Obviously, he hits harder, and I'm going to go with Vitor Belfort in this one. John Lineker against Brian Keller. Man, this is a tough fight. Even though Keller's not ranked, I think this is a very close fight with Lineker ranked 6th. But I'm going to go John Lineker. I think he did very well in his last fight against a guy who, honestly, I picked against him. I thought Marlon Vera was going to perform a lot better, but John Lineker just kind of put the brakes to him a little bit. And so I think Keller, while extremely talented, I think I wouldn't be super shocked if he won, but I think Lineker, he's really good. He hits really hard. So I'm going to go with John Lineker in this one. Mackenzie Dern against Amanda Cooper. Going with Mackenzie Dern. I know Amanda Cooper's, my hometown girl, and I wish her the best of luck. I'll be rooting for her. But right now, I think Mackenzie Dern, with her submission and grappling and jiu-jitsu ability, I got to pick Mackenzie in this one. So I'm going to pick Mackenzie to stay undefeated. Co-main event of the evening, middleweight division, Jacare Souza against Kelvin Gastelum. I almost never pick against this guy. And the last fight was one of the few times I probably have ever picked against him, and I was proven horribly wrong when he beat Derek Brunson. So I'm going with Jacare Souza in this one. I feel like his size, his strength, and of course his jiu-jitsu ability, he'll be able to get this fight to the ground, impose his will, and get a submission on Kelvin Gastelum. So I'm going to go with Jacare Souza in this one. Main event of the evening, Raquel Pennington against Amanda Nunes. Pennington's in every single fight. She's never been put in the way in the UFC. She's a grinder. She has great conditioning, great heart, will, determination, all that good stuff. However, I don't think she quite has the skills to beat somebody like Amanda Nunes. So I'm going to go with Amanda Nunes to maintain her championship and get her third successful title defense in her home country of Brazil. Well, that does it for me here on Beyond the Cage. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. It's just my name, JimGramm. You can also like us right here on Facebook for MMA World. It's facebook.com/MMA World with 2 extra Ds, and also the same handle on Twitter. And you can also follow our sister page, MMA UK. That's facebook.com/Mixed Martial Arts UK. Also on Twitter at We Are MMA UK, and of course online 24/7 with the latest and greatest in news, opinions, shows, interviews, and all that good stuff at MMAUK.net. So for MMA World, for MMA UK, and thank you for everybody listening. I'm your host, Jim Graham. Until next week, thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage. Goodbye, everybody.